First, I would like to say good afternoon. It's not only an honor to be with you, it's just an excitement and a happiness. I have wished to be there in person, but you know that sometimes things happen. But I was following you all these couple of days, and I have saw the potential of the youth you have. And I would love to thank the organization committee for joining all these youth together and to open discussion for a new era, for the common good of not only Africa, but for the world, to fulfill the agenda of the 2063 of Africa hand in hand. Thank you very much, Hilda.
Thank you very much, Dr. Kasil. Dr. Lynn, thank you for joining us.
Okay.
Please, we would like to receive your remarks.
Okay, great. Bonjour, bonsoir, bom dia, buenos dias. Good afternoon to everyone at the conference. I'm so sorry that I wasn't able to join you in person. I was at the conference last year in Ghana and it was fantastic. Silver Stool and myself were just honored to be part of this panel as partners of the All Africa Students Union. We're excited to learn from you, to work with you, and to co-create better programs for digital education so that you can have a safe and secure digital engagement experience as you grow and develop. So
thank you very much. Yeah, thanks. Thank you very much, Dr. Lynn. Thank you for joining us. I look forward to this afternoon's presentation. So I'd like to call the next person who is I would like to say that he is representing the student front. So tonight we are going to be hearing about the student voices in digital inclusion. So Erickson, over to you, your remarks.
Hello, everyone. As she just said, my name is Erickson Mugisha, the Guild President at the University of Rwanda. I am a student representative in the House, and I do believe we're going to have a very wonderful session together. And about the theme, one thing young people in the House should get to know is that I've liked that data must fall. My main view on the digital era, data must fall. I think everything that I'm talking about today is going to be centered around data must fall. I've just liked the hashtag. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Erickson. And lastly, wonderful Carl.
Good afternoon, everybody. Carl Carter, CEO and founder of Snake Nation. We're a culture, content, and technology company. Our focus is getting young Black and Brown creators into the creative economy as a means of alleviating youth unemployment and poverty. We are a proud partner of All African Student Union, and so excited to be here to have this dialogue, and thanks for the time.
Thank you very much, Carl. So before we go into the issues, I know you've heard our speakers mention All Africa Student Union. You've seen AASU, Data Must Fall, and all of that. So before we go into the issues, I would just like to give a brief introduction of who we are. So the All Africa Student Union is a student-run organization. It's a wholly student-run organization that is based in Accra, under the headquarter agreement with the government of Ghana. But basically, we comprise of all the national unions associations across the continent. So if you come to Rwanda, we have University of Rwanda, we have RANSA. If you go to Gambia, we have Ghana National Union of Gambia Students, Ghana National Union of Ghana Students. So that's our embodiment. And what we are into, we mainly focus on 7 strategic priorities, which are migration and mobility, capacity building, environment and climate working group. We also have education and student rights working group. We also have the Pan-Africanism and then African culture as well. So these are the strategic areas that we focus on as an organization. If you'd like to inquire more about us as we go on into the conversation, I'll give you a lot more about our website, our handles, so that you can get to know more about what we do and then how best you can also participate in our activities. So thank you very much. And we are going straight into the question. So this is going to be an all panel question. And I'm going to have all the panel answering this question, which is very important. So the question one is, what are the skills that are required to become an effective leader in the digital era? So the question again, what skills are required to become an effective leader in a digital era? So Kyle, go first. Yeah.
I think number one skill is probably teamwork. You know, when you're talking about working with people in multiple places, like, you know, digital organizations, they're a lot leaner, they're a lot more streamlined. And so knowing how to work together, I think, is a critical leadership skill, just the ability to, you know, articulate vision, to be able to drive motion towards that vision, to understand the needs of your team, and so that you can maximize the effectiveness of your organization. And so I think people having that vision to organize around, you know, for AASU, all the work that you guys have been doing for 50 years, you know, like that vision allows people to get over the humps that naturally come in business or, you know, civic society. So I think that teamwork and articulation of vision is key.
It's an important skill. Okay. Teamwork and articulation is an important skill to have. So Erickson, what are your thoughts? What skills are required to become an effective leader in a digital era?
Thank you, Hilda. I think the most important skill to have is having online responsible behaviors. Online responsible behaviors. Because if you need to be like a successful digital leader, I mean a leader in the digital era, you need to be responsible in as far as online and online experience are concerned. So I think you need to have that high level personal, I mean, self-management and data management, like data privacy and security, all that kind of online responsible behaviors. If you want to be a successful leader in the digital era, you should have all those.
Okay, thank you very much. Dr. Kasir, what are your thoughts? What skills do you think it's necessary to become an effective leader in a digital era?
When you say leadership, there's a very important skill that we need to have, which is along assertiveness. You need to have innovation and creativity. A leader needs to be entrepreneur by nature. When we work with the market, we build partnerships. The leader that has vision is a leader that puts a plan. And when he puts a plan based on a design thinking, on innovation and creativity to open opportunities for youth. If you are a leader, you don't only build leaders, but you build opportunities for these leaders to find where they need to really implement the skills they are building. And with digital literacy, a leader can open a lot of opportunity. He can work on inclusivity, big terms that before we couldn't have the opportunity to share. We couldn't have the opportunity to talk even about. So digital literacy, along with assertive leadership that has innovation, creativity, and entrepreneurship, this is a very big formula that we need to work on these days.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Dr. Kasir. Dr. Lynn.
Yes, thanks, Hilda. So just to touch on what Dr. Kasir has said, it's important to have digital literacy skills in terms of using computers and associated technology confidently. But as part of that, it's important to have digital diversity and inclusion awareness skills, because you are communicating with unknown audiences across different cultures and countries. And you need to understand that a meme can be perceived differently by different cultures. On the back of that, we're also living in a data-driven digital era. And so it's important for a leader to have data analysis skills using data science tools and techniques in order to be able to analyze information from competitors, from customers, using data science applications such as Python and R programming. A third skill that I think is important is in terms of understanding that even though we're working in the digital space, we're communicating with people, and people like to speak in, people speak in different languages. And so it's important for people to have some understanding of different business languages. In Africa, for instance, we have French speaking, English speaking, Spanish and Portuguese speaking countries. In the Caribbean, in addition to this, you have Dutch speaking countries. And so it's important to still maintain those kinds of language skills as well, but just in terms of business language. And I think that's it for me.
Okay, thank you very much, Dr. Lynn. So I'd like to ask again, we heard most of our speakers mention that one of the most important skills to have as a youth in a digital era is digital literacy. But I would like to ask, while digitalization helps economies to grow, digitized induced growth depends on how literate a society is. So what measures could we take to improve digital literacy in developing countries that has exceptionally low digital literacy rates? Yeah. Erickson?
Okay, thank you. The first thing to do is digital education, digital literacy must be embedded in the curricula. Starting from the young age, young kids must be given that content in which digital education is embedded. In Africa, we have a culture of if a kid wants to develop some digital skills, they must develop first, be brought up first, and then at the level of high school, that's when they start engaging with such kinds of skills. But my understanding and my view, digital education, all those basic digital skills must be embedded in the curricula given to the students, which means we need to revise African curricula in different countries. Different national governments must take this into consideration, that digital skills are now basic skills. They are not advanced skills. They are just basic. Yeah, that's my view. So to make digital literacy improve in Africa, first of all, digital skills, basic digital skills must be embedded in the curricula given to the students, starting from a younger age, and it keeps on advancing as they advance into the next level. That's it.
Absolutely. Carl?
I think depending upon which country, access is going to be one, so how do you make sure and I think this really ties in with the data must fall, right? So how do you make sure that there's free public Wi-Fi, for example? It's just, a basic need that services a lot of people. We saw this in South Africa happen right outside of Pretoria for the city of Swanee. And so they have free public Wi-Fi. And then, they work to use that as a platform for local content creators to, create content and so forth. So even once you have these platforms, they in turn can be used to educate, but they can also be used to employ. And I think that, so to me, it's like it really does start with that. And then, people understanding, especially when you talk about some of the, the cost of data across the continent varying so widely, largely for profit motives, And so if we stop viewing that as oh, this is only for people that can afford it, and this is actually a right, we have a right to information, then I think, public-private partnerships are going to be key to help, bring those countries along that have low participation so that the access can be there. And then once you have the access, then there's tons of online education platforms that you can tap into so that we don't have to create from scratch, or offer opportunities for local startups to create unique platforms that are in language and in culture and more relevant. And so I think, all of that are, sort of pieces of the puzzle as it relates to creating a culture where, people are more comfortable with digital skills. And, for me, I'm a big proponent of mobile. I think, getting mobile devices into the hands of people in whatever methodology that is key. So maybe I don't have, enough going on in my life to have multiple laptops or computers or whatever, but I should have a cell phone as a basic. and what kind of what kind of content can I access there as well.
Okay, thank you very much, Carl. Before I go to the next speaker, I think you touched on something very important that I'd like to ask a follow-up question. So you talked about partnership, and in terms of private and public partnership, how do we create a successful private-public partnership between governments and then private organizations, the telcos, so that they ensure that data indeed fall? Because during the COVID seasons, we saw that a lot of students were unable to participate in from one of our sessions we did, and one of our researches we did, we came to a conclusion or a finding that a lot of students were unable to participate in educational activities because of the cost of data. So in talking about partnership, how do we ensure that there's a successful partnership built between the public sector and the public, which is represented by the government, and then the private sector, to ensure that there's a win-win situation somewhere regarding data, regarding telcos, and then the use of the internet. Yeah.
I mean, so I think you said it, it's a win-win. So what makes a good partnership in business and life, is that everyone is concerned about the other person's welfare. And so I think oftentimes what happens is, you're speaking two different languages, when you're talking about public and private partnerships. I was in the last session talking about like the speed at which technology moves or startups move. They're much faster than corporates or government. And so, finding ways that people can align on goals, like what are the milestones we want to accomplish? What are the common goals? What are the things we want to get done? What's the method that we want to use to accomplish those goals? I think all of those things have to be laid out ahead of time, and then of course the resources need to be there. And that oftentimes becomes a challenge, And so what I liked about this free public Wi-Fi model is that, like, for example, Google does it as well. And so Google will say, okay, I'll provide free public Wi-Fi, but when I come to that landing page, there's going to be advertising on it. And so that benefits the advertisers because they're able to, reach an audience that's utilizing, when you log on to free public Wi-Fi, you come to a landing page. What's up, man? You come to a landing page. That landing page, they serve you ads. Those ads fund the Wi-Fi. Those ads also create a revenue base for content creators and other things to happen, free education or whatever that may be. And so, those type of partnerships where people understand, like, businesses are often in business to make money. Very few businesses are, impact type of businesses where they're really measuring their social impact as one of their KPIs. And so, until we start to get the entire, business culture moving in that direction, then, everybody at the table must understand what's important to the other party. So if I'm a telco and I'm sitting across from government and government is saying, hey, I need to make sure my people have affordable Wi-Fi, you say, okay, great, I can give you the technology, but I need these things in return. I can make sure that this is affordable, but maybe I need tax incentives to do it. Or maybe I need, access for advertisers or whatever it may be, or maybe I need a trained population. So I think it just kind of depends upon the priorities of all the parties at the table to come to a winning agreement.
Absolutely. Thank you very much, Kyle. Dr. Casio, so back to you. What measures could be taken to improve digital literacy in developing countries?
First, Hilda, I would like to thank you for this very smart question and very deep. And you have touched on basic challenges of countries. We're working currently with the Ghana Education Service. Our first concern is infrastructure. You cannot develop digital literacy without having the proper infrastructure. What does it mean? When you say digital literacy, it's not only having a phone. It's not only having a laptop. Digital literacy means using the digital skills in order for you to build, what? To be an independent learner. So if you have the infrastructure, means you have the policy in place. So we will go back to the policy making. If we have public-private partnership, the goal needs to be aligned with what the policy is dictating. The main objective, which is education for all. Microsoft has offered the Microsoft Teams. And the Microsoft Teams was offered for free for everybody during the COVID. But after that, everybody was stuck because we're using Microsoft Teams. Yes, it was for free, but later on, it's a business. So when you are putting your policy and you are putting your partnership, you need to take care of the context you are working with. African, even Arab countries are based on funds, World Bank, OECD countries, they are depending on ILOs, IMF, so they are receiving the grants. But what is the role of the government? The role of the government is to manage the finance. The financial management is the key, and it comes hand in hand with every policy in order for you to build a digital literacy. Why? Because if you are implementing digital tools, technology, and innovation, you are lowering the cost. You are even reducing the need for some human capital that you are building, and you are reducing some maybe customer service. You are replacing the customer service and the call center by Eva. But on return, you need to build engineer. You need to invest in your resources. You need to build more professional agricultures and to increase the local production to support your economy. Therefore, I will come back to the SDG goals and build smart, sustainable cities. And when I say smart, means digital, where technology is there to support innovation and creativity, and sustainable, where policy making is doing the right thing to build a policy that lasts, not only for now, that lasts forever, while we are investing in your natural resources, starting from your youth. You have said the first key of the agenda is student mobility. I will ask you, where's Dr. Lynn today? Where am I?
In London.
You are in Rwanda, exactly. So these mobility, when students are moving and we are having this mobility, we are going towards having experiences, and then the country needs to bring back and to attract the youth to build the sustainable smart city that we are intending to. Therefore, the first plan that we need to do is to build a very well-tailored infrastructure based on clear policy with clear indicators targeting youth development, and that looks back to roots, to culture, to natural resources that are in the country itself, and to create local opportunities and not pushing our youth out where there is the opportunity, not here. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Dr. Lynn, you have the floor.
Okay, thanks, Hilda. Okay, so for us, I think it's about just building on what Erickson said, integrating digitalization into not just the formal education sector, but the informal education sector. So all students from kindergarten to tertiary and all members of communities then should be digitally literate. And so I see a role there in terms of NGOs and academic institutions to form partnerships with governments, with telcos, with providers of digital services in order to ensure that communities are digitally literate.
Okay, thank you very much, Dr. Lynn. So this question is specifically directed to Dr. Kasir. So Dr. Kasir, my question is, what opportunities are currently available in the digital economy, and what skills are required to access these opportunities?
I will tell you now that we will have to develop 260 million digital skills. You'll tell me from where I got this number. I'll ask you, Hilda. Ask me this question.
Where did you get that number?
Because there is 260 million child who has been connected into the COVID on a computer worldwide. So the skills that you need to develop are the skills that really are giving you the tool to find yourself a career. From where you're getting these opportunities? I will give you 3 places. First, volunteer. When you volunteer, you are creating an opportunity. You are developing skills. You are getting paid by the knowledge you are getting. Second, when you are working as per the SDG goal as a plan, you are connecting yourself to opportunities. Siemens, this is, I'm not doing, sorry, here a marketing. It's an example, sorry. So Siemens has been identified as top company who is applying 2 SDG goals, which is the well-being, number 3, and number 4, which is education. So every single student who wishes to do internship, he's always welcome in Siemens. But you see that by the time everyone is getting there, he is very happy. So the opportunity you're having them by volunteering, by making the right choice as per the SDG goals, the statistics. And the third thing, the opportunity, is what the government is offering for his people. You're going to tell me how? I will go back to policy. The government needs, in a globalized world, to always keep room for the nationals. I will give you another example, more concrete. When we are in a globalized world, means we are opening the barriers of everybody. Inside one country, there is always a margin to give opportunity for the local people if they have the skills, if they have really what is needed to get the job, to give them the priority. Because I don't need them to go and leave. I need them to stay. So these 3 main features, these are auto-creating an opportunity. This, in addition, of course, there are a lot of websites, that there's a lot of companies like Job Connekt that can really help, and they help to find job for youth all over the world and globally and for free.
Okay, thank you very much, Dr. Kasil. So she's made some very important points in her presentation. I'm sure the third one, you and I have very low control over that. We have a very less control over that, which is the government's aspect of introducing new policies that would benefit its citizens. But the first 2, we can equally pursue it, which is volunteerism. A lot of students don't like volunteering that much, especially when it doesn't pay. So I think one of the ways to find opportunities and then get to learn new things is to help yourself find a volunteer work. Look within your local communities. Where can you possibly get a place to do a volunteer work? You can just walk into a design company and be like, okay, I just want to learn some graphic designs, but I don't have, because there are some of these companies, when you join them, you have to pay huge sums of money to learn. But when you go as an intern, as a volunteer, they teach you, and then you don't get to pay anything. So volunteerism is a very important point there. Thank you very much, Dr. Kasil. And then the SDG goals as well.
Can I add something very important that Dr. Lin has mentioned? The languages and the knowledge. So I'm not sure if you know, but in Germany, if you want to go even to volunteer, if you don't know the German language, they do not allow you. So very important to have the language as a package, and very important as well to have the knowledge. The knowledge means, when I say knowledge, means the studies, the education. You need to have this willingness to learn. If you have the willingness to learn, definitely you will go and volunteer. You will say, listen, guys, I don't want really money. I want to learn because I want to learn this job. And I will relate this to the certification merit. There's a university in Switzerland that gives you a certification that is equivalent to how many years of experience in the market you have. This is an opportunity for every single child or youth or young man, young woman who really finds herself more into the vocational and not into the academics.
Okay, Dr. Kasil, would you mind sharing the name of the school so that maybe our audience who are currently listening to you, if they have interest, they can look it up?
It's SR21. SR21.
SR21.
Yeah.
SR21. Okay, thank you very much. So we'll move on to the next question, which goes to Carl. So Carl, what are some approaches that developing countries could take to foster investment into digitization?
Has everybody seen the meme where they have this, all of the African CEOs of tech companies, and they're all white men? And so, you know, what you have happening, so you have the same level of barrier to entry for tech founders of color here as you do like in the States or wherever else. It's like 1% of VC funding goes to tech founders of color. And I know we share the same reality. We deal with this all the time. And so, you know, I would say that one, you know, it's like we're all trying to thread the eye of a needle with that approach. So I would say that if you are in tech and you are of color, then you better know how to be an entrepreneur. That would be my number one piece of advice.
Okay.
Otherwise, you'll be in a constant cycle of waiting for someone to fund your idea. But being entrepreneurial means like, hey, build a minimum viable product, build a product that's good enough to be used so you can build data points. So you can, like, when you're talking to people, you can say, hey, I've got X amount of customers, I've got X amount of users. And building tech is a long process, you know, so you have to create something, then you have to get feedback, and then you have to incorporate that feedback, and then you have to do new releases. And so lots of times the tech that we're consuming is just from like massive companies. So we're not really seeing, like, no one remembers when Google was a startup, like very few people, you know, or, you know, Uber, right? Like I was watching a documentary, not documentary, but a show on Uber, like how Uber actually started. And so when you see that these, like a lot of these founders that we celebrate, they have the advantage of privilege. And so if we don't have the advantage of privilege, then we should not move like those that have the advantage of privilege. We need to move like our reality. Our reality is you better know how to be an entrepreneur, bootstrap. And so do what you can with what you have, you know, I would say. From a government standpoint, in terms of like, how do you encourage investment? I mean, trade missions are obviously dope. But, you know, again, like we need to change that dynamic of who holds the capital. And so until we change the dynamic of who is actually holding the capital, then now you're in more of a dance than you are in a negotiation, you know?
Yeah.
And so I think that's going to be really critical so that you have more investment happening on the continent from African investors, or investors that are from outside the continent, but recognize the value that Africa holds. And you're seeing this happen in fintech. So you're seeing a lot of big investments happening in fintech in West Africa heavily. But, you know, just like anything, right? Like everyone loves a trend. So what happens if you're like doing fintech in Southern Africa? They say, well, fintech's really for West Africa, right? Like you guys have it sorted out in South Africa. It's like, no, we don't have it sorted out. How many people are like unbanked right now or underbanked? Tons. And not only here, communities of color all over the world are systemically underbanked and unbanked. And so, you know, that's why you have that adoption of fintech happening in these communities faster, whether or not there's cryptocurrency or whatever else it may be, because these are communities that are traditionally shut out of traditional financial systems. And that is across the board, whether or not you're in the Caribbean, you're in the States, you're here, wherever you're at. If you're dealing with people of color and we're dealing with poverty, then you're dealing with people that are like making ends meet. That's why remittances is such a big business everybody wants to get their hands on, you know? And so like, you know, government being able to recognize like, hey, I have to do more to encourage and develop homegrown tech talent.
Absolutely.
I have to have requirements around that. If you want to participate, okay, you're a VC, you want to participate, great. These are my requirements. Because the last thing that VC wants to be is a person that gets blocked from being able to invest, right? And that no one wants that. So everyone does have leverage at the table. It's just realizing like what your leverage is. And so for the founders, it's not a fun game, you know, because if you're an entrepreneur, you know, you really have to kind of come with a different mentality around that, because government's not necessarily, you may be able to get some funding, but even that is incredibly competitive. So whatever it is, whatever funding source, whether that it's government or private equity or venture capital, whatever it may be, it's incredibly competitive. And so oftentimes it's relationship driven, you know, just like hiring, you know, you tend to hire people that look like you. You know, and so, and that happens, that becomes this echo chamber of people that are holding capital and investing and taking bets with people that look like them, that they're comfortable with, that they were introduced. Like some VCs, you can't even get, like, there'll be no, I saw this one website and they had no way to contact them. They were like, someone will introduce you to us, and that's how we'll find you. We only take referrals from our networks. Well, if those networks are not diverse, then you're just perpetuating the problem. And more often than not, 99% of the time, they're not diverse. So as a founder, you know, when I sit on these panels or I'm attending conferences and I see Black founders who take on VC capital, and then 2 years later, I see those same Black founders struggling to maintain control of their companies. So even though we all go after the capital, there's also strings attached. So let's be real, right? And so, you know, not everything is about getting this outside capital. I would say learn how to build a business, a real business that can earn its own money. And then even when you're sitting with investors, you have way more leverage. You're not there begging for like, oh, please see my idea. Like, nah, I got a business. This business is making money. Would you like to invest in my business? Okay, great. If you don't, that's cool. We're going to continue making money. And that time is everything. I mean, the runway. I mean, I'm preaching to the choir here, but like the runway is everything. So the runway is just the amount of time that you get to problem solve. So whatever problems you're facing as a business owner, the more time you have to solve those problems, staying alive is the rule of thumb. Stay alive. Every day brings an opportunity to problem solve. Every day brings an opportunity to pick up the phone. You're not in a cycle of waiting. I don't recommend waiting for anybody, for anything. Do not wait. You know, do not wait. Don't do it.
Okay, thank you very much, Kel. Thank you very much. Before I come to Erickson, Dr. Lin, this is my question to you. How could we ensure that human rights are protected in a digitized developing economies? Recently, when we celebrated the International Day Against Human Trafficking, it came out from a finding from a research that most traffickers now resort to online or digitized means to approach their victims. So in as much as we want to move deeper into the digital era, how do we ensure that human rights are protected?
Well, first of all, Hilda, I was very saddened to learn about the findings of this report. And so I just want to pause and ask the audience, how many people have heard about this report? And maybe you can tell me by a show of hands, Hilda, is there anyone who has heard about this report?
So anyone here who has heard about the report that perpetrators are recruiting or finding their victims of human trafficking through online means? So for instance, some people fall victims to false employment offers, false scholarship schemes. So you'll be there and then you just receive a text message. Okay, there's this scholarship here in Canada, scholarship in Germany, and there are usually links that are sent through our WhatsApp platforms online. You click on it and then you just realize it's a scam or it's a fraud. But people end up becoming victims on it anyway. And this is a report from the UNODC. So Dr. Lin is asking the audience in the house, how many people know the findings of this report or have heard of anything of that sort? Or you know a friend who has been a victim, or you yourself have come across any link like that, you know, associated with employment offers. We are offering you an employment in United Arab Emirates with this amount of money. No one here has seen that?
No
okay,
one.
So I've seen quite some hands here. I've seen about 5, 6 of them.
5 or 6, okay.
Yeah.
Out of how many people? Approximately how many people are there?
So out about 60.
60 people.
Right.
Okay, so I have another question for you. How many people saw the YouTube video from London Notting Hill Carnival where a bus stop collapsed because people were dancing on it?
Okay, so I have 1 hand up, 2
Only
hands.
1? Okay.
3 hands.
Okay.
Yes, I have 3 hands up.
Okay, so I'm a little surprised that less people saw that video, but I was at that carnival, and actually I received messages from people all over the world, from Ghana, from the USA and the Caribbean, about the bus stop video. But less is known about the findings of this report. So I think this really underlies the need for greater awareness of the risk associated with online platforms. This is a real opportunity for governments, NGOs, social media providers, and influencers to promote digital human rights. I think, all of us are users, and as a user, you need to take extra steps like you would for in-person communications to ensure your digital safety. So if you think back to when you were younger, your mother told you don't talk to strangers. And, it was easier to do that in person, but online, you need to communicate with strangers for collaboration, for job offers, and you just don't know who to trust. So you need to take some certain steps in order to ensure that you're communicating with a reliable person or credible person. So for example, you could look at websites, you could monitor the website for a day or two before you give out the personal information, and think about the personal information that you give out as well. So you need to validate websites, validate profiles of people. If I could just take a real example, for example, with us at Silverstool, we recruit for universities in the US, Europe, and the UK. So you can go to our website and you can see the logos of the universities there, or you might take an extra step and email the universities to find out if we're legitimate educational agents for them. So I think it's about, there's a role for all of us, not just the governments, for NGOs, social media providers, influencers, but also for users as well, to protect our human rights.
Absolutely.
Digitally.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Thank you very much, Dr. Lynn. This one is very dear to my heart. So I hope that you've noted something there, because I'm going to come back asking you what you heard from this question. Okay, so Erickson. Yeah, so this is my question to you. Since you are representing the student front, over the years, students through activism and participation have contributed significantly to the evolution of socio-economic as well as governance systems on the African continent. So I'd like to ask you, in your view, how can students and young people champion the era of digitization for Africa's advancement? Sorry.
Thank you. I think this concerns me too, because I am still a student. I think my view looks at three different perspectives. One, a youth or a student perspective. Two, a government perspective. Three, a key stakeholders perspective. The private sector, the NGOs. But starting with perspective number one, students need to know everything has been put in place for them. So sometimes we, students and young people, most especially here in Africa, on the continent, we do not take care of the treasures we have. Like giving an example of my country, Rwanda, everything has been put in place to help the young generations, to explore more about what we can do as far as the information age is concerned. So it's about we, the young people, the students. For those who are so unfortunate in countries where the advanced infrastructure is not yet developed, it's a pity for them. But for those who are in countries where everything has been put in place, we have no excuse. So from this student perspective, we are not limited in thinking, dreaming big. We are not limited in innovation and invention of new ideas, new concepts. We're not limited. It's about we, the students, the young people on the continent, to think about what we can do to use the opportunities available. On a government perspective, the different national governments need to know that however much young people and students generally are expected to deliver a lot, they need to be given a lot. Not only the basic ones, everything that is needed for someone to be fruitful. What do I mean? we need to see youth-friendly policies on the continent as far as digital era is concerned, because we need to see new concepts being developed. So we need to see policies that are even flexible, which do not, strain anyone from thinking beyond their capacity. So we need to see, to think beyond what we see today. So to do that, governments need to know that youth-friendly policies, regulations need to be put in place. Two, from the side of the governments, we need to see some kind of fund, funding our projects. Like I have a project that I'm working on. I need to be rewarded for the, for the percentage of the project covered. If I cover, I complete 20% of my project, I need to be funded, to be rewarded for that. What does it mean? It is a kind of a motivation. It shows me my project is supported by the government. So whoever comes and adds on another 20 to make it 40% needs to be rewarded for that too, until the project is full. So what does this mean? Governments need to know that students and the youth on the continent need to be supported financially, because we have everything that it takes, but resources are still limited as far as the youth is concerned. So the thing number one is government should put into consideration that we can be given everything, but if basic resources like money is not available, then we can do nothing. Three, from the stakeholders' perspective, the NGOs, the private sector, they should know that this is the right time to venture into digital advancement on the continent, because Africa will not always be the Africa we've had for so many years ago. I was born, when I was born, I was told that Africa is a dark continent. Being dark simply means we can do nothing. We can do nothing. Everything that we have to do or to use in our daily life is made for us. So we need to be engaged. So those stakeholders, the private sector and the NGOs and stuff like that, need to know that today is the right time to venture into digital empowerment here in Africa. Let them know that they are the resource owners. They have resource, they have everything needed, but young people on the continent have nothing other than the ideas. So we young people on the continent have the willpower to do very tremendous achievements. We have high learning abilities as compared to the ones in the 40s, 50s. We have access to different digital devices. We know everything about data science. All we need to do to see is empowerment now from the government and the rest, the stakeholders. The NGOs. So today is the right time to venture into digital advancement. If we want the young people on the continent to champion digital advancement here in Africa, let them be empowered, let them see some kind of support from those ones who are in position making, the decision-making positions. Lastly, we need to see policies that do motivate us to think beyond. What do I mean here? Like here in Rwanda, there are very many government projects whose main purpose is to empower young generation here in Rwanda to think more, to invent even what has not been invented yet, because not everything is invented. So we need to see those kinds of policies being put in place to motivate us to think beyond. There are things that all the mature people here in the country, I mean, from across Africa cannot do, but young kids, starting from the age of 5, a young kid can just explore through a smartphone at the age of 5. And we have a very large number of Africans in the 40s and 50s who know nothing about this smartphone, or who have limited knowledge about how it works. But a young kid of 5 knows everything about it. This simply means we also need a clear strategic orientation on how to use these. Not everything that is digital should be, integrated in our daily life here in Africa. We need a clear strategic orientation on how digital devices can be used to make Africa advance in as far as digital transformation is concerned. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Erickson. Just a quick one before I move to the next one. I heard you talk about empowerment. I think that empowerment is very key when it comes to students and youth on the African continent. But I've also come to realize that in dealing with these categories of people, capacity and then experience is looked forward to. So I just want to ask you, how should students or the youth of Africa position themselves in such a way that they are trusted in these things, in terms of experience, in terms of capacity?
The first thing they need to do is to recognize the opportunities available. That's point number one, because we need to take seriously the treasures we have today. If we need to position ourselves in a winning position, the only main thing we need is to recognize the opportunities we have today. 2, yesterday we had a very great session with the President of the Republic of Rwanda. He was talking about working hard, working smart, but above all, having discipline. We don't only need to work hard or work smart. All those, without discipline, without purpose, everything's down. Everything is being done in vain. So what do I mean here? We need to combine everything we can do, the abilities we have, and above all that, we add on a clear purpose of why we are doing that, a clear vision. Then thirdly, we should keep some level of discipline if we want to be in that winning position. This goes to all the young people in the house.
Okay, thank you very much. Before I move to my final question, this question is directed to Dr. Kasir and Dr. Ametewe. So what are some of the measures that could be adopted to prevent the widening inequality gap because of digitizing developing countries with a high percentage of vulnerable people?
Okay, so I think that the aim is by 2030 and 2063 to leave no one behind digitally. So there has to be targeted interventions to increase access and use of the internet by vulnerable people, including women, children, older people, and people with disabilities, also people in rural communities. So in the last question, you were talking about things like capacity building and empowerment activities. And I think these will be key to reducing that inequality gap and reducing that digital gap that exists as well. Because what has happened with digitalization is that it's also produced a digital gap in terms of the people who have access to the internet and those who don't have access to the internet. So that also needs to be bridged. If I could just give an example of programs directed at reducing the gender gap. We have created at Silverstool a line of courses under our By Women for Women brand. And so we're encouraging women to design and deliver short courses for other women. These short courses are light touch courses such as how can I set up a business to sell honey? How can I set up a catering business? Those kind of light touch courses can get women more involved into the digital economy and digitalization.
Thank you very much.
I guess inequality has been a trend everywhere in the world, but actually there's a lot of inequality. And COVID has took us back into the real meaning of inequality, where women who used to have some work had to stay home and men come back to work. So this is one example. I will go back to what His Excellency the President said. We need first to have confidence and goal and purpose. What is my purpose today? What is your purpose today, everyone here in this gathering? Your purpose here is to make forward and to move forward within your country, because you're proud of your identity and you're proud who you are. And if I'm proud of my identity and who I am, I will work hard with discipline in order for me to achieve my goal. When I say achieve my goal and I say the word I does not mean Hind, does not mean I'm a woman. It means I as a human. Human means if I have disability, I don't have disability, I dropped out from school, I'm a working mom, I'm not a working mom, I'm just a mom, I am starting my life, I'm poor, I'm rich, I don't have, I can manage my account, whatever. You have the opportunity today to build your own destiny with an entrepreneurship mindset. And why do I say mindset? Being an entrepreneur, it's something we talk about, but it's not easy to fulfill and to do because it needs a lot of time and patience, endeavor, power, courage, and in sometimes investment. But if you have the mindset of an entrepreneur, means every time you fall, you go back again and you work hard, regardless who you are. This is equality. And this is entrepreneurship mindset. And I am inviting you, because you told me it might be the last question, I'm inviting you today to be confident that Africa is the best continent of the world. And if you are confident, you will work depending on that. You will be proud of the agriculture. You will be proud of your production and industry. You will be proud of your legacy, of your roots, of the language, of the dialect. And you will create the unique idea that will make you today the best in the world. Because everyone now is seeking for novelty. Everyone now is seeking for something unique that is not on the social media trend. Everyone now is seeking authenticity. And when you are authentic and when you are unique, you are creating your own equality, because you're creating your own place in the society and you're saying, this is me, I'm standing out. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you very much, Dr. Kaso, for that submission. So at this point, we'd like to engage our audience a little bit. So audience, if any one of you has a contribution or a question to ask any of our panelists, the floor is open. Okay, so so let's do this. You raise your hand, I count, and then we'll move that way. Okay, so My gentleman at the back, you are number one.
So good evening, everyone. I'm Bhumesh Kumar Sitaram, a current law student at the University of Mauritius. And it is indeed a pleasure for me to be here because I'm from an African small island developing state. And it's good to be in mainland Africa and feel included as one family. So my main question is to any of the four panelists. So I've learned a bit on education diplomacy, which is currently an emerging field of practice in the global education sector that uses skills of diplomacy to support progress in education, such as building a collective vision around shared goals for education, among others. And my question is, what is the scope of digitalization in education diplomacy? Thank you.
Thank you very much. Any of our audience could answer that? You just, if you're online, you just unmute and speak. If you're in person, you just pick up your microphone and speak. My panelists.
I can't see it if anyone is in person raising his hand. You tell us, Hilda.
You can't see us, but we can see you very well.
Do you want me to answer that?
If you'd like to answer that, I mean, that's fine.
And I have been appointed here in the UAE to work on this specific project. My dear friend and my small lawyer, hoping that you will be really a diplomat later. Diplomacy, it's not only education, it gives the real value and ethics of building the new citizens of the new era. And I'm very happy that you asked this question. Can you please give me his name again?
His name again?
Yes, his name again, please.
Omar?
Omar?
Bhumesh Kumar Sitaram.
Gomesh.
Bhumesh.
Komesh.
No,
Yeah,
it's
Komesh.
Sitaram is easier, sir. Yeah. Sitaram.
Sitaram.
Sitaram. Okay. So the main focus that we use the Sitaram using digital tools. We have built a system first that assesses competencies of all candidates who wish to go to a program called Diplomatic Leaders. We have used the AI learning machinery in order for us to assess first their competencies, second, their willingness to be in this job, and we have associated the full learning machinery AI to the oracle, means to the history of this person. So we identify if this person, not only in this test, if he is really eligible to go to a certain leadership for diplomatic purposes, but as well if the history of this person really supports that. After that, they set for emotional intelligence testing, where we are identifying as well their emotions and how they react, self-control, how they manage with anger. This is very important because every diplomat, in order for him to be in a very, let us say, in a very controlled situation, he needs to really manage his behavior, his emotions. And after that, they have to go through an interview. So what the learning machinery or the AI learning machinery helped us? It helped us to give first a data-driven decision making. Because we are dealing with people, we didn't only count on the data-driven results. We had an interview. After the interview, they went into this big program of 6 months. So diplomacy, yes, can be associated with digital tools, but not fully. A part of it that is data-driven, that will support the decision-making for every single mentor, trainer, or maybe leader to support the young leaders who want to go into diplomacy later on in their life, because they will point out specifically what really they need, and they will work with focus on that in a very short, limited time. And hope I answered your question.
Okay. Yes, he's nodding his head. I think he's very fine with your answer. Thank you. So my lady, you're number 2.
Good evening, everyone. I am Noktula Mamba, a director for Youth Sustainable Development Center, a youth organization based in Eswatini. So I just have 2 questions. One is on economic participation within the digital space and digital advocacy. So firstly, on the digital economy, how can we accelerate the inclusion of youth within the informal sector? We're seeing that there's a rise of unemployment and most of them actually find themselves joining the informal sector. But looking at now that we're also taking the direction of digital economy, how can we ensure that they are also part of the digital as we move forward, building a sustainable communities? And also, I think one of the panelists keeps on mentioning the policies, the politics that seeks to also advance digital access. But one thing that we are realizing, especially within the African space, is that our government keeps on developing policies that are not really ensuring that most people participate in digital spaces, but it actually hinders down, especially when you look at digital advocacy or activists who are within the digital spaces, they find themselves being victimized. So how can we then also engage and equip people with better skills, such as the digital securities? How can I, if I'm a human rights activist as a leader, or even part of student unions, who is also actually ensuring that all the students in the various universities actually get good education and other necessities for their education. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
So one of the things, as we talk about, like, well, what can government do, or what role does policy have to play? And I don't think that it's only government's job, but there are areas. So like, hubs and, programs that help develop like seed level companies, because that's an area of investment that's incredibly hard to find. Most people that do want to invest tend to come on later. And so it's often left to the entrepreneur or the youth to try to get that particular company or solution off the ground. And so knowing that there are gaps that can be filled, to me, is where government can play smartly, right? And so if private industry has, wants to come on at a later time, then you can start to have hubs that really focus on developing pipelines of young people. The challenge, though, with these programs is oftentimes they're not linked to capital. So you'll be like, overdosing on like skill sets and trainings and this, that, and the third, but there aren't like job opportunities at the end or investment. So I would say, just as these programs are developed, while the skills development is great, I think, that skills development or these programs also need to have an opportunity at the end. Like the Andela model is interesting, for example, right? And so Andela basically, provides high trained computer developers for like Silicon Valley companies, for example, right? Doesn't have to only be Silicon Valley companies, but the point is, like, you're taking young people in, giving them skills around computer development, and then they're employed in the business that then outsources those young people to be developers for any type of product. And so what happens in that process is they get the experience, but then as well, it's a sustainable business. It's not only on government to maintain these programs forever, but to play strategic roles to fill the gaps. And then private industry, if they want to operate in country, then need to say, great, I want to commit that I'm going to hire young people coming out of this program. So those commitments also need to be in place for commercialization. And so, what I found interesting, and I live in South Africa, so I'm a neighbor, is that you have all this training, which is amazing, like all these incredibly trained young people, but then they hit the business world and then they're not employed. And of course, we have almost 50% youth unemployment right now, right? And so that, requiring commercialization as part of relationships for companies being in country means that everybody's on the same page. I think that's critical. So people have access, they want to do commerce, they want to sell goods and services to citizens, but then they also need to be invested in the future of that country by investing in young people, by making commercial commitments. And that's whenever you have issues, it's because, young people want opportunity, and so I hear you, like policies can be in place, but if those policies can't be implemented in ways that like meet the business reality, then oftentimes they're not like, they don't receive or achieve their full potential. And so I hope that answers first part of your question. Okay, and the second part of your question?
Yes, my name is Jonathan Kauma with UNDP Uganda. My question goes to Carl and probably Dr. Lin. So both of you talked about entrepreneurship for in the digital era and creating digital entrepreneurs. So my question would be, it's a two-part question. How do we create resilience in line with the theme of Youth Connekt? How do we create resilient entrepreneurs? Africa is known for having the largest startups, but they do not last. Within a period of probably less than a year, those startups do not last to see a second birthday. So what advice would you have for the youth to become resilient digital entrepreneurs? And then secondly, how can when these youth become entrepreneurs, how can they access funding? What can they do to improve on how they access funds? Because like any startup, when you look at Uber, when you look at Facebook, Apple, all these companies accessed funding at a certain level of their growth for them to become bigger. So how do we as Africans, when we become entrepreneurs, when we become resilient entrepreneurs, how then do we access this funding? Because it's as much as you say we need to become entrepreneurs, at the end of the day, we need funding to create these resilient businesses and startups. So I just want to understand from your perspective and from your point of view as a CEO, how you have been resilient in your business and what advice you would have for the youth. I guess the other panelists as well can answer, but mainly directed to Carl and Dr. Lin. Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you very much.
Okay.
So, Carl will go first.
Okay. So for the first question around like entrepreneurial resilience, that's like part of the DNA of being an entrepreneur. So if somebody starts something and then they hit some lean months and then they quit, then it probably wasn't something that they were really passionate about. So when you're like sitting and designing and figuring out like what you want to do, like I found this Snake Nation because I was a creative and I've been a creative my whole life. And I was like, I'm tired of seeing creators that don't have anything when they get old. How do you deal with that? And so the problem was personal. And so I think oftentimes, especially when you talk about tech or building solutions, these are like you're trying to solve problems that are close to you. So my first piece of advice would be make sure this is something that you really want to do, right? Because there will be lean moments that you will question yourself, you will doubt yourself, and there will often be times where you won't necessarily have the support around you. So that vision, that mission, the thing that you're out to accomplish becomes your true north, right? It's why you're doing what you're doing. And teams come and go, unfortunately, right? So if you're the founder or you're a part of a founding team, you need to make sure that you are clear on your own pathway for your own personal survival, right? And so that's why I was talking about bootstrapping in the last panel. I was like, you have to bootstrap. You have to know how to continue your business if the funding is not coming from outside sources. So if you're not receiving investment. Oftentimes when you first start a business, it's really difficult to find seed funding, right? Somebody says you have a nice idea, you don't have a business. So you have to be able to do your own level of investment, which means that this may be your night job, your weekend job, right? Is what you do. When I was first starting Snake Nation, I entered a program in Goldman Sachs called 10,000 Small Businesses. But in order for me to enter that program, I had to take my current business and then I had to say, okay, well, this current business qualifies me and I'm gonna take my time every Friday for 6 months. I would hold myself up in New York in a room with other entrepreneurs and just build. And you just have to be obsessed with what you're building. Because, like universe, I don't want to get too spiritual on you, but, it's all science, right? It's waves and energy. So if you're putting out the energy, then obviously that energy will be coming back. And again, you don't know when and how that's going to happen. So you have to kind of move forward with the faith that this is going to happen. And you have to have faith in yourself that you're meant to do this, that this is for you to do, going back to the notion around purpose being critical. So that resilience, that purpose, that faith, these are all things that are like the faith-based part of being an entrepreneur that people don't really talk about. But sometimes it's like you and God being like, oh my God, I don't know how, when, whatever. For me, that's where I go. So I think when you talk about, you know, what it takes to kind of get past that hump, you have to build a business, even if it's a little one, you know, to prove out, like, how do you know people want what you're making? And so that building out those little small proof of concepts serves two purposes. One, it's self-funding, right? And then two, you know, you're learning about your customer. So when you do sit with investors, you could be like, I've got X amount of customers. I've been in business for X amount of time. This is what I've been learning along the way, because you will absolutely take those learnings, incorporate them, and make your product better. So that's the double, right? You know, you're not going to like go out, and if you're like a startup with a ton of funding, then you could say, okay, cool. Well, I'm going to set up A/B testing and I'm going to do customer interviews. And so there are things that you can do that big startups can do, but just in your own scale. You know, the process of starting a thing could be the same, even if you don't have the same level of funding, you know, but the tenacity of being an entrepreneur, you just cannot overlook that. Like, that is absolutely part and parcel of what people count on you for. When I was exiting my marketing business and starting Snake Nation, I stopped taking on clients because I was like, this is it. I'm no longer in a service-based business. I'm over here building product. And so I had to create discipline for myself as an entrepreneur to say, I'm not doing that anymore because that's low value revenue. I'm going to put my mind and energy over here, even if it takes longer to get to high value revenue. But you have to kind of create discipline in how you move as a business person to create opportunities. And so knowing the difference between like short-term problems and long-term problems. Short-term problems, like, never confuse short-term issues, right, with long-term issues. So sometimes people make, oh, I'm out of cash, I'm gonna fold my company. That's a short-term cash flow problem. That's not a long-term problem. That's a short-term problem. So what happens is people make short-term decisions that have long-term implications. You know, I would never advise somebody to quit, you know, pivot, do what you got to do, stay in the game. Like, the big share of being an entrepreneur is like you show up to do the work. And what you're doing, I mean, every entrepreneur will tell you, like, what goes to market is not the idea that you started with. And really, it shouldn't be. It should change, it should evolve, it should get better. Snake Nation was incredibly different in my mind than what got created here on the continent, because I had partners like Tizzo, partners like Dre, that were like, hey, we need crypto, we need college clubs, like things I wasn't even thinking about. But they come because I got up that day, I was able to take a meeting, I was able to meet somebody, and then boom, and everybody can work together, you could do your thing. That's the excitement of being an entrepreneur. And that's where I think, like, we're better off than we think we are. Because as long as we continue to imagine in our minds that we have these dependencies, then you will have a dependency. But if you say, I have everything I need, then you will have everything that you need, you know, and it's difficult to see it sometimes, but that's the reality, right? Like, your 2 feet brought you here today. Now you have a connection. Where does that connection go? What do we need to be doing in Uganda? Let's figure it out. But if you're not raising your hand and asking questions, and I saw you were here at the other one, so I know tenacity, right? Then, you know, you can't accomplish what you're out to accomplish, you know? Government does have a role to play. Private business absolutely has a role to play. My personal opinion is, like, everybody wants these consumers. So if you want this billion-person market, then everybody has a responsibility to make sure that that billion-person market can thrive. It's in their own best interest. This is not give us a good look, you know? This is not charity. This is investment. And so everybody, so as you are, like, you know, involved in UNDP, and as you are, you know, a young person out here making moves, you know, never stop, because people are watching, right? But as well, understand that people do have a responsibility. And I got to say, growing up in the States, I'm not used to government that's trying to look out for Black people. That's like mind blowing. I think anything is possible, frankly, you know, because it's like we're used to government that is against Black people. Right. So when you grow up in those environments, we're not looking to government for answers. You know, government is a problem. Government funds the police. Government does these things that impact us. Government segregates us. Like, so when you're in these environments where everybody along the value chain, even if we have different opinions on how we get there, the end goal is, I want to see my kid do well. Everyone acknowledges that. So I think there's a massive level of opportunity because you actually have willing government that wants to see young Black people advance. That is massive. In the world, that's massive. It's massive. They're not going to do it all for you, but it's a major strategic advantage versus trying to launch the same thing somewhere else where somebody's like, Black people, forget about it. Black people, there'll never be anything. And I've been in those rooms. I'll tell you, those rooms exist, man, all over the place. So, you know, the fact that you are in places where people want to invest in your success means that anything literally is possible here, which is why everybody with half a brain needs to be in Africa trying to figure out, like, how can we be a part of this wave? So I would say, you know, personally, you want to catch up, let me know what you're doing, what you're working on. Check out Snake Nation. That's why we're here. We're here for young creators and young entrepreneurs and young tech founders of color. And we're built to problem solve with young people in partnership with young people. All right.
Thank you very much, Cal. Dr. Lane, would you like to add up?
Yes, thanks, Hilda. Okay, so I just want to build on what Carl said. I mean, a few things he said. The first one about resilience. I mean, you don't even think about resilience. As Carl said, the startup becomes your obsession. I mean, it's your vision that goes into setting up that startup. So you start to eat, live, sleep, breathe, your passion, your vision, and that is the startup. And so it becomes a part of you and a part of your DNA. The other thing I want to touch on is about you being more confident that right now, as Carl said, all eyes are on Africa. They're on African youth, African trade, anything coming out of Africa. All companies want to do business in Africa. They want to target African youth. And so your startup is going to be looked at by people from all over the world. So you don't just have that 3 billion market that's sitting there in intra-African trade, depending on what your products or services are, but you also have the potential to reach customers globally. And so I think you really just need to think about, this is your startup, this is your idea, and just launch it and just keep at it completely. In terms of funding and different models, I think you need to think about in this space. For example, with Silverstool, what we've done is that we formed strategic partnerships with other startups. So you're not there by yourself. There are other startups there just like you that are also looking to reach new markets, new opportunities. Last year, I mentioned I was at the conference last year in Ghana, the Youth Connekt Summit, and I sat next to somebody from Zambia, and he was telling me that he had launched a startup in Zambia in the fintech space. And so I showed him the Silverstool website, and I said to him, would you be interested in partnering to co-create a course on how to set up a startup in Africa, and also another course on how to set up a fintech in Africa? And he said yes. And so if you look at the Silverstool website today, we have that course that we're running in partnership, as a strategic partnership with that organization. And so you need to think differently, I think, once you're sitting in the African space, about funding, not in terms of the way that funding happens in the developed economies, but funding in more creative ways, because it's not just your startup that's there, there's other people in the same position. And so even with Silverstool, you know, when I was asked about what quote I should give for this session, I gave the quote that every young person has something to learn and something to teach. And that's what Silverstool is there to do. So basically, you can reach out to us if you have some course that you want us to co-create together, or whether you want to be an instructor for the course. You can do these things. So you can create the opportunities in order to share your services with others in exchange for, you know, for money, of course. And so, yeah, so do check us out in that sense. I hope that answers the question for you.
Absolutely. Thank you very much.
Okay.
So we ended here, and this is not the end. So, I mean, if any one of you wants contact with any of the panelists after we close the session, you can just see us. For those who are in person, you can go directly to them. You talk to them, you exchange contact, or whatever your questions may be, you can follow it up with them. So thank you very much. And it's been a wonderful session. And we hope to make more impacts in the future. Thank you very much. My name is Hilda Nyakwa Bekwe, and I'm a programs officer with the All Africa Students Union. It's been good having you all. Thank you.
Hashtag Ghana must fall.